You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 342, and it's another Friday episode. I'm recording solo today, so it's going to be another short episode, but I did want to record a quick update on one of my IG reels that kind of got a lot of traction because of a clip I put together from a podcast episode with my friend Dan a week or a couple weeks ago when we were talking about PSA Upcharges. But before I get into that, I also want to give a quick heads up about a new mini podcast / video series I'm working on and I'm hoping to do throughout the year called Not For Sale. And the whole idea or premise behind it is asking collectors one simple question. What is their one favorite card that they will never sell for whatever reason? And each mini episode, which can be as short as 2 minutes long, will hopefully tell a story of why that card is special to that collector. Maybe for future guest interviews on the pod, that'll be one of my last questions for the guest I'll ask. And depending on whether there's a cool story behind it, I can always include it as part of this new Not For Sale series. Now, if you're a listener to the pod and you have one in mind for yourself and you don't mind sharing details of your story, please reach out to me on Instagram at 5cardguys, all one word, or at Cards to the Moon. That's all one word as well. And I'll include both links in the show description to make it easier for you guys to reach me. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, I'm excited about this new mini series. And to give you guys an idea of what I'm envisioning, I started the series with myself and a card that's special to me. I'll play the audio version for you at the end of this podcast episode. But if you want to see the video that goes with the story, either on IG Reels or YouTube Shorts, you can search for it at 5cardguys on both platforms and take a look there. I'll have it uploaded by the time this podcast episode airs. Okay, now going back briefly to the post that last time I checked has 35,000 views on Instagram about the PSA Upcharges. I just wanted to provide a bit of context because on one side, I got a few people saying I was misrepresenting PSA or I was misleading the guest about what PSA Upcharges are all about. And on the other side, people just started calling PSA a scam and also responded back to those who seemed to not have much issue with PSA Upcharges. So the context of that episode is that I was just telling my non-collector friend about various hobby topics at a pretty high level, right? Including what upcharges are. So no, I didn't get into the details, nor did I really want to. But I can see how people would think I was intentionally misleading listeners as to what PSA upcharges actually are. I think in that episode, I just mentioned that PSA can upcharge if the value of a card increases substantially after getting a good grade. And I think that's all the detail I really went into. I might have said because PSA added value, this is why they're adding upcharges, which if I did, then technically, I guess I would say the upcharges are more of a result of moving the grading service to a higher, more expensive tier where the declared value of the graded card is higher. Okay, and one of the reasons is for the added insurance for PSA to hold that now higher valued card because of the new grade before they send it off back to the collector. So I don't know if that was a little more clear, but it's definitely a little more detail in that answer. That doesn't mean I still agree with upcharges, or at least the way PSA does it. For example, it raises more questions, in my opinion. You know, there seems to be so little transparency as to why each tier costs what it does, and if it is primarily for insurance purposes, right? And if it is, then I wonder how much PSA is making off of these upcharges. I wonder if they actually use the money to pay out for cases where a card is lost or mishandled or overgraded. I know they have that overgraded guarantee. They can pay out what the value of the card would be at the higher grade. Or is this just another revenue stream which they can simply justify the cost of the tiers and therefore the cost of upcharges, and ultimately use that money to be used for something else within PSA? Other questions are, why don't other graders upcharge? Do they charge a regular price for the level of service they offer? And then do they allocate a portion of that regular price in case they have to pay out for any kind of damage? Is this a better model, right? Or do we prefer this model? Or do we think as long as PSA graded cards can continue to provide excellent ROI, which it does on a lot of PSA 10 cards, will we collectors just be okay with status quo? I don't know. I can go on, but I think it'd be more fun to have some of my podcast co-hosts weigh in on this discussion. So I'll save it for a future episode. But in the meantime, if you guys have thoughts about upcharges yourself or grading in general, let me know. And you could always contact me again at 5cardguys or at Cards to the Moon on IG. All right. Like I said, right now I will play you I think it's just 2 minutes. It was pretty short, 2-minute premiere episode of the miniseries, not for sale right now. Hope you guys enjoy, and see you on Tuesday for a brand new episode. See ya. The card I'll never sell because of the enormous sentimental and nostalgic value it has for me is my Mookie Wilson 1991 Upper Deck baseball card. I just checked, and you can get it for as low as 14 cents on eBay. But the card I have personally was autographed in person by Mookie Wilson himself when I was around 13 or 14 years old. It happens to be my first IP autograph card that I actually stood in line for. And thinking back, it was probably because he happened to drop by the local card shop one day and a friend told me about the signing event. My favorite player at the time wasn't even Mookie. It was probably Tony Fernandez or Fred McGriff at the time. But I've never seen a big leaguer up close until that day I got Mookie Wilson to sign my card. Never mind the fact that this was the player who hit the infamous grounder through Bill Buckner's legs in Game 6 of the 1986 World Series, forcing a Game 7 where the Mets ended up winning the championship. For me, Mookie Wilson was a top-of-the-order hitter for my hometown team, the Toronto Blue Jays, during the 1990 season when we felt it would soon be our turn to win the World Series. And he seemed larger than life that day, and the fact he acknowledged me when it was my turn for his autograph, I can't remember what I said, but it was probably something incoherent just because I was in shock. I do remember though that he was kind and genuinely seemed happy to be there. For a diehard baseball fan in his early teens and an avid card collector, this is one of those moments you never forget. And I'm glad that more than 3 decades later, while many of my old junk wax cards were thrown out or just lost, this one somehow survived and remains in mint condition. But it doesn't matter because this one's not for sale. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.